Hello, everyone. I'm Christopher Nicholas here with PA Political Digest. And instead of writing an essay today, I decided to have a chat with one of my TV sparring partners, Brittany Crampsie of Britt Crampsie Communications. She is a Democratic political consultant. Thank you for waving, Brittany, so people know whom is whom.
I want to be very clear for our audience.
That is important to be clear for the audience. So we are today, October 7th, 4 weeks away from Election Day 2025. So I thought we'd do a brief 10, 15-minute election preview. And let's start with the one that most people are probably aware of, which is we have three Supreme Court justices, all Democrats, up for retention in November. Retention is kind of a truncated ballot question. Shall so and so be retained for another term on such and such court? Their party is not listed. I've described it as they're kind of running against themselves. Normally, retention elections are total yawners. We've only had one justice of the Supreme Court not retained in the modern era since we've been doing that, and that was 20 years ago. So that's kind of the scene setter. People will see that on their ballot, uh, regardless of how they vote. There's three separate questions for each of the three Democratic Supreme Court justices who were elected 10 years ago. Your thoughts, Brittany?
Well, you say that the one that most people are aware of. I hope that most people are aware of it. These odd year elections are so low information and so low turnout. And for a lot of voters, depending on the county, this is going to be entirely on the back of their ballot. So you see a significant amount of drop off of people that just fill in the front, particularly if it's a mail ballot, stuff it back in the secrecy envelope inside that mail envelope and send it back. But these are really, really important. I mean, you don't get a shot to do a job approval rating of your justices, but once every 10 years. And the 2015 swing of the court was huge. I mean, you have seen enormous, like democracy changing decisions out of this court. They very famously threw out our horribly gerrymandered maps. They have defended voting rights over and over again when mail ballots continue to be challenged. They've addressed environmental issues, corporate issues as it relates to labor and wages, and they've weighed in on reproductive health care access. So the state Supreme Court is very different than the federal Supreme Court, and I'm hoping that most voters go in knowing some of the accomplishments of this court and vote yes, obviously. But again, this has not gotten a ton of attention yet. You're starting to see it pop up on your TV. If you are a scroller of Instagram, you're probably getting a lot of ads and have been for about the last 4 weeks. But we only have 4 weeks to go, and I'm not sure the average voter knows that we have a retention race yet.
So conservatives and Republicans are upset with the Democratic majority of Supreme Court on a whole host of issues. One including them just whole cloth deciding they can write their own congressional maps. They're not by statute involved in that here in Pennsylvania. A lot of other things we saw during the pandemic shutdown that Tom Wolf, former governor, to me, didn't think he needed to negotiate because he had the backstop of the Democratic Supreme Court, who, even though the term drop box is not in the campaign law, the voting reform law, they allowed those things to be created. So people who have a different interpretation of the court are upset at them. So there's three justices: Christine Donahue, Kevin Dougherty, and David Wecht. As you said, they were all elected in 2010 and 2015. It was a big time election. Democrats and their allies did a better job of Republicans and our allies in rallying people to that cause. They all won fairly handily. Wasn't super close. So here, I wrote about this a week or so ago in PPD, that what is different from 10 years ago is Donald Trump. In 2015, he was just kind of coming to national prominence. He was not yet the Republican nominee or leader or president. And there were a million more registered Democrats in PA than Republicans. And now the registration is even. So why don't you give us your take on how those two changes might impact the race?
I think I'll put together that's a mixed bag. You see Trump's approval rating continue to crater in Pennsylvania, and he's causing chaos amongst your pals, Chris. He's telling the people not to vote by mail, that it's fraudulent, that it's corrupt, that the Dems are stealing elections. I guarantee if we could steal elections with mail-in ballots, we would have a lot more power in Pennsylvania, but we don't. At the same time, you have the Pennsylvania Republican Party urging their voters to vote by mail. You have conservative activists like Scott Pressler urging people to vote by mail, but they're getting such mixed signals from Donald Trump. So I think that is problematic. In an odd year election where your electorate is older, mail-in ballot is very appealing. But if you're a MAGA Republican, you voted for Trump, and you're hearing him say don't vote by mail and you can't get to the polls, I think you're in a tough spot there. Now, on the registration, don't want to sugarcoat it. It's not great. However, registration is what we call a lagging indicator. So even if you were registered as a Democrat for the last 10 years, we have no way of knowing how you voted. And based on the performance in the counties that are driving this registration change, suburban Pittsburgh, the industrial counties around there, the Northeast, they had a lot of registered Democrats, but their performance was showing a lot of votes for Republicans. So a lot of this is paperwork change. You also have automatic voter registration through PennDOT now. So if you go and update your license, you can very easily change your registration. If you get a license for the first time, you're registered for the first time. So performance, very different than registration, but it is certainly something that Democrats used to count on and cannot so much anymore, particularly as Philly's performance drops.
So on the voter registration, a million more to now essentially zero. That's a big deal. So I understand the whole lagging indicator. I've been writing about that for more than a decade, but I think a million difference is going to have some impact. We don't know exactly how. On voting early, I think a lot of Republicans last year found a workaround to that, and that was voting early in person. So you avoided having to give the ballot to someone from the Postal Service. So what we saw in 2024 were two trends. One, the number of people voting early was declining, but the number of Republicans voting early was going up a little bit. And as you well remember, we talked about it on TV a lot. Republicans won all the statewide races here last year, but there's this pendulum that swings, right? And last year it swung towards the Republican side. Who knows what it does now? As for Trump, the Republican uh, Party's challenge has been to replicate his voter base when he's not on the ballot. So he is not on the ballot. I have not seen any indication that he is getting involved in this race. And today I see that the vote yes folks are utilizing popular Governor Josh Shapiro here in a TV ad. Uh, do you know anything about that ad?
It's a beautiful ad. It's called Threat. It talks about the challenges to democracy, healthcare access, union rights, things that go before this court, and what's at stake if we don't retain these judges and instead open it up to a new election. This court has been very steadfast in its defense of democratic values, and I mean democratic with a small d. And Governor Shapiro, who has a 60% approval rating, is strongly urging a vote yes on this. And if you pair that with Donald Trump, even if he were to get involved, he's polling in the low 40s. So if it's a head-to-head popularity of Trump versus Shapiro in this, when people are making that final decision, I think Shapiro's ad is going to convince a lot of people. So that's running in Philly and Pittsburgh starting today, and I think you can expect to see it across digital by later this week.
So my thoughts on that is I kind of saw it coming because earlier this week, again, this is Tuesday, you and all your fellow strategists and communicators on the left started strategizing and talking a lot about abortion. So I kind of figured that was coming down the pike. I think it's a little early. That's to me a closing call. And to do it 4 weeks out, I don't know whether that means folks on your side are being prudent or they're a bit worried. There is, for the first time ever, an organized vote no campaign. In the past, these things, like I said, have been sleepers. So this will be an interesting test to see when you have an active vote yes and an active vote no. I would also remind folks here in PA that there are two other judges up for retention a Superior Court judge, and a Commonwealth Court judge. Luckily for all of us messaging strategists, all five of them are Democrats. So it's easy for your side to say vote yes, and easy for my side um, to say vote no. So I am interested to see the ad. I have heard of the ad. I have not, as we tape this at lunchtime on Tuesday, actually seen it, but you said it's only running on TV in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So we would
Just
not see it here in Harrisburg.
you may see it online. I would not be surprised for it
You think I
for
would
it.
see it online? Me, an old
I
white
think
Republican guy, you
you
think I'd get served that ad?
I think all votes are up for grabs in a retention race. I think this is going to be a Democratic vote yes win across partisan lines too. And, to your point about early communication, the election has already started. Mail-in ballots are going out. People are already returning them with a 42-point Democratic advantage. Of course, it is not a statistically significant sample size yet, but I did see the first batch dropped with the Department of State yesterday. So, it's not election day anymore. When you're talking about making your closing argument, it's almost that last week of September as the counties are getting ready to send out their ballots. So we have rolling election day for about 4 weeks now. And on the issues here, if you ask any voter in any election their most important issues over the last, say, 5 years, you'll see the economy, healthcare, and democracy in the top three. There's very little that the judicial system can do about the economy. There are no cases before them that ask, should workers make more? And they rule yes, and everybody's wages increase, or everybody's grocery costs decrease. But they do look at things related to access to healthcare, and they certainly are a backstop for the defense of democracy. So in 2023, there were several open court seats. Democrats swept them on those issues because the issues that are related to the judiciary are the ones that do skew a little bit left, even with independent voters.
So again, this would be if this was a stock, we'd call it a thinly traded stock because there's not a lot of information either paid by the campaigns or done by the press. I'm not saying the press isn't doing their job, but I would remind folks that to me, when I see the leaves changing and I see pumpkins on people's porches, it's time for Democrats to start hyping their advantage with early voting, dropping things like 42% this and 18% that. And again, it's hard to read those tea leaves because, as you said, you don't know how those people necessarily are voting. Democrats have had an edge in early voting since it was created. And so far, the Republican Party is doing pretty good. So again, that as you said, it might be on the back of your paper ballot, right? So make sure you flip it over and vote on it. I don't want to end this before we talk about some actual races for court. There is an open slot, a regular Democrat versus Republican on the Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court. Let me say the candidates real quick for Superior. The Democratic nominee is Washington County Judge Brandon Newman, a former member of the state house. And the Republican nominee is Republican lawyer Maria Batista. She's from Clarion. He's from, as I said, Washington. So two of those on the western side of the state. In the Commonwealth Court race, it's Philadelphia Judge Stella Sy versus Republican Erie lawyer Matt Wolford. So I am interested to see that three of the four candidates are from Western PA and one is from Philly. And I feel sorry for all four of those people because their races are totally overshadowed by what we just spent 12 minutes talking about, which is retention. And normally, like I said, the retention vote is a nothing burger.
Certainly. And, in 23 and in 21, I think we saw a lot more contentious school board races too in the general election.
They
And
don't seem to
a
be as
lot
contentious this year. Is that your feeling too?
I have absolutely found that to be the case. In fact, where I live, there was a very well-funded Moms for Liberty Challenge slate 2 years ago, and they failed to file a single candidate just 2 years later. And I think that's happening a lot of places where those extremist takeovers of school boards were unsuccessful. They're not mounting another challenge. And then a lot of the big splashy mayoral races were decided essentially in the primaries. So that's not going to draw people out as well. So, those poor Superior and Commonwealth Court judges caught in the middle. But I think with a strong vote yes effort, you'll see, Dem down the line.
So that is a challenge for the Democrats. There is no mayoral race in Philadelphia, which is the largest municipality in the state and the most Democratic. And there is a campaign in name only for mayor in Pittsburgh. That city is so Democratic. I'm glad that Republicans have a nominee, but it's not going to be a race. So those two big drivers and big homes to Democratic voters will not be pushing out turnout. And one of the big problems for Democrats in the last 8 to 10 years is their turnout in Philadelphia is terrible. They control the city, they've controlled it for 3 generations, and you folks can't seem to figure out a way to motivate your people to vote.
To some degree, we've maybe squeezed all the juice out of Philadelphia that there is, but we have room to grow in a lot of other counties. You see the Republican margin narrowing in places like Cumberland County, Dauphin County, where they took majority of the county commissioners last year. 2 years ago, I'm sorry. And then places like Lancaster, where a Democrat won a special election to the Senate. I mean, if we continue to perform well, even if it's not 100% turnout in places like Philly and Allegheny County, if we hold down the margins of Republican strongholds, the map gets more difficult for Republicans. So we are not fully counting on those edges of the state, but instead cutting into margins, taking over municipal boards, taking control of county seats in places we hadn't before, and relying on, 67 county strategy instead of a two.
So I'm going to bring this video and audio edition of PA Political Digest Tuesday edition to a close. Thank you again, Brittany Crampsie. You can see Brittany and I many Sundays on This Week in Pennsylvania all across the state. Check your listings, Britt Crampsie Communications. And we have a great time chatting politics as we did today. I hope everyone enjoyed this little bit different Tuesday edition of PPD, and I will be back in your email boxes on Friday with my normal roundup of the week's events. Thanks again, Brittany. 4 weeks from today, folks, make sure you get out and vote. Thanks.